My name is Evelyn Monroe. I'm 38 years old, a financial consultant in Chicago. For most of my life, I thought loyalty could heal anything, even the wounds carved by family. I worked hard, stayed quiet, helped when they needed me, hoping one day they'd finally say they were proud. But love built on conditions always collapses eventually. That collapse began on the night of my parents' 36th wedding anniversary, a night that still echoes in my chest every time I hear a glass clink. The restaurant was warm, filled with chatter and jazz, tables glittering with candlelight. My sister Lydia sat at the center, charming the relatives, talking about her latest promotion and her leadership team. My mother couldn't stop smiling. My father looked at her like she hung the moon, and me. I was at the end of the table, nodding, half invisible, pretending it didn't sting. Then my father stood up to give a toast. His voice was steady, confident, proud. To 36 years of love, of family, and to our pride and joy. He raised his glass, looked at my mother, then at Lydia, and said without hesitation, "Honestly, we wish Lydia was our only child." The room froze. The laughter stopped mid-air. Lydia smiled, that same cruel little smile she'd worn since childhood, the one that said, "You'll always be second best." My mother stayed silent, swirling her wine. And me? I just sat there, heartbeat pounding in my ears, realizing that the people who gave me life had just erased me in front of everyone. I didn't cry, I didn't speak. I pushed my chair back, the scrape echoing across the room like thunder. "Enjoy your night," I said quietly. And then I walked out, heels clicking across the floor, each step lighter than the last. Outside, the cold Chicago air hit my face, and for the first time in years I felt something I couldn't name. Maybe grief, maybe freedom. That was the night I stopped being the daughter they pretended not to see. And if you've ever sat in a room full of people and felt completely invisible, I know how that feels. You're not alone. Tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes, knowing we're not the only ones who've been cut by family helps the healing begin. I didn't know it then, but walking out of that restaurant wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a new life. A life where I would finally learn what love was supposed to feel like, and what happens when the truth finally catches up with those who broke it. That night, as I drove home through the quiet streets of Chicago, the snow beginning to fall in soft, lazy spirals, I realized that my father's words weren't new. They were just the loudest version of what I had been hearing my whole life, whispered through every silence, written in every ignored moment. I grew up in a house where love had rules. My sister Lydia was the rule book. If you shined like her, you were adored. If you stumbled, you were a disappointment. I was the quiet one, the helper, the fixer. When Lydia came home waving her trophies and honor rolls, my parents' smiles could have lit up the whole neighborhood. When I brought home my own small victories, a school award, a science project ribbon, they'd say, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to Lydia's latest achievement. Even as a child, I learned to shrink my excitement, to clap for her louder than anyone else, because that was what love looked like in our home, applause for someone else. As the years went on, that pattern didn't fade. It hardened. When Lydia got her marketing degree, they threw a garden party. When I graduated with honors in accounting, they mailed a card. No phone call, no celebration. Mom said she'd been busy. Dad said, "You don't really like attention anyway, do you?" I laughed it off, but inside I felt something crack a little deeper. Still, I told myself it didn't matter, because I wanted to be the good daughter, the reliable one. So when their small clothing store began struggling, I stepped in without being asked. I was 27 then, just starting my career, saving for my first condo. Every month, I wired them $500 to help cover rent, inventory, whatever they needed. And every time I sent that money, I told myself I was doing the right thing. That was the first betrayal, not theirs, but mine. I betrayed myself, because deep down, I knew they weren't grateful. They saw my help as duty, not love. At first, it was little things. Mom would say, "You're so responsible, Evelyn. We're lucky to have one daughter who thinks ahead." But the moment Lydia mentioned a new marketing idea, something simple like changing the store's logo or hosting a sale, they'd beam at her as if she'd saved the family empire. Dad would tell everyone Lydia's ideas are really turning things around, while my financial report sat ignored on their kitchen counter. The night I realized how deep it went was a Tuesday. I had just spent 3 weekends fixing their tax filings, caught errors that would have cost them thousands in penalties. When I called to tell Mom, she said, "Oh good, by the way, Lydia's planning a summer event. You should see her new flyer, it's stunning." Not a thank you, not even a pause. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, staring at my reflection in the window, the city lights blinking behind me, and I whispered to myself, "What am I even doing this for?" It wasn't about the money. It was about chasing something I'd never had, their respect. That's the cruel part about favoritism. It doesn't just hurt you, it makes you question your own worth. Lydia wasn't cruel in words, not at first. Her cruelty was quieter. A tilt of her head, a smirk when Mom praised her in front of me, "Don't worry, Ev, you're good with numbers, I'm good with people." I'd smile back, pretending her words didn't sting, but they did. Every single time. Sometimes I think the hardest part wasn't their favoritism, it was how normal it all became. I convinced myself it was love in its own form, that maybe I just had to keep proving I was worth it. But love isn't something you have to earn like a paycheck, and yet I kept paying, month after month, year after year. So when my father said, "We wish Lydia was our only child," it wasn't just cruel, it was confirmation. All those years I spent saving them, fixing them, forgiving them, had bought me nothing. That was betrayal number 1. The second one, the deeper one, was still waiting for me. And when it came, it wouldn't just break the illusion of family, it would shatter everything I thought I knew about loyalty, blood, and trust. A week after that dinner, I still couldn't shake my father's words from my mind. They echoed through every quiet moment, while I brushed my teeth, while I tried to work, while I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just the cruelty of it was the certainty in his tone, as if he had finally said something he'd been holding back for years, but maybe I should have seen it coming. That night wasn't an accident. It was the truth finally saying itself out loud. The restaurant had been beautiful, candlelight glimmering off the glassware, the hum of conversation wrapping around me like smoke. Everyone looked so happy. Except me. I remember sitting there, fiddling with my napkin as Lydia told another story about her leadership team. Her voice carried across the table, clear, confident, the way my parents always liked it. Every compliment that followed felt like another nail in a coffin I didn't realize I was lying in. Dad nodded, proud. Mom reached across the table to squeeze Lydia's hand, and when I tried to speak, just to contribute something, anything, Mom waved me off gently. "Let's not bore everyone with numbers, sweetheart." That word, bore, stuck to me. I wasn't interesting, not bright enough, not colorful enough to be worth listening to, just the quiet one who handled their bills, fixed their problems, paid their debts. So I sat there and smiled, that fake, practiced smile that says, "I'm fine," even when you're dying inside. But when my father raised his glass and said those words, honestly, "We wish Lydia was our only child," something inside me cracked so loudly I swear the room heard it. I felt my body grow cold, like my blood had stopped moving. Every conversation around me blurred, faces melting into nothing but sound. Lydia's smirk was the only thing in focus, her lips curving just enough to tell me she'd won. I wanted someone, anyone, to say something, to tell him it was cruel, to look at me and say I didn't deserve that. But silence filled the space, thick and suffocating. That's when I understood. They didn't see me as a daughter. I was a tool, a wallet, a convenient solution they could discard when it didn't suit them. I took a breath, steady but sharp, and pushed my chair back. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. Forks froze midair, eyes turned toward me. I stood tall, not out of pride, but because collapsing would have felt like giving them what they wanted. "Enjoy your night," I said softly. It was all I could manage, but somehow it felt powerful. I walked past the waiters, past the tables of strangers who watched with pity or curiosity. Each step in my heels echoed like punctuation marks to a story I was done living. Outside, the Chicago air cut like glass, cold, sharp, honest. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I stood there for a long moment, my breath visible in the night, and whispered to myself, "That's it." No more trying for years. I had mistaken endurance for love. I thought if I gave enough, they'd see my worth. But all it did was teach them how much they could take without giving back. That night, sitting in my car, I replayed every moment in my mind. Every check I'd written, every call I'd answered, every time I'd been told, "You're such a good daughter." It all sounded different now. It sounded like use. I grabbed my phone, opened the family group chat, Mom, Dad, Lydia, and typed a message with hands that didn't tremble, not even once. "I'm done helping with the store. No more money, no more advice. Good luck." Then I hit send. The message sat there, blue and sharp on the screen. I waited, half expecting my mother to reply with guilt or my father to call me dramatic. But nothing came. Not yet. When I finally put the phone down, I felt light. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was the strange stillness that comes after a storm destroys everything. That night, I walked around my apartment barefoot, touching the walls, the quiet, the safety of my own space, something they could never take from me. And then, the messages began. Dad's voicemail came first, his voice clipped, annoyed. "We need to talk about this." Then Mom's text, "Evelyn, don't overreact. You know your father didn't mean it that way." And finally, Lydia's message, one word, no punctuation. "Seriously?" I stared at it for a long time, the glow of the screen lighting my face. 3 messages, 3 people, and not one of them said I'm sorry. I set the phone down, turned off the lights, and sat by the window watching the snow fall over the city, each flake dissolving as it hit the glass. And in that quiet, I whispered, "Let it all fall apart." Because for the first time, I didn't want to fix it. For the first time, I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped saving people who never once tried to save me. That was the night I chose peace over approval. And in a way, that was the first night I began to truly exist. The morning after I sent that message, the silence felt heavier than I expected. No buzzing phone, no guilt calls, no apologies, just stillness, the kind that comes when you finally stop running toward people who never looked back. For a few days, I thought that was the end of it, that maybe after all those years they'd finally let me go. But I should have known better. People who live off your help don't go quietly, they go cruelly. It started small. A few whispers in the family group chat that I had overreacted. Then came the phone calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. "Evelyn, your mom's worried sick. You really said you're cutting them off? After all they've done for you?" Their words stung, but not as much as what came next. Lydia made her move. 2 days later, I woke up to a flood of notifications. She had posted on Facebook, a long, carefully crafted message full of half-truths and poison. "Some people think they're indispensable," she wrote, "but sometimes they forget that family means sacrifice, not selfishness." No names, but everyone knew who she meant. Cousins tagged each other. Family friends commented with sad emojis and prayers. And just like that, I became the villain in a story I didn't write. I could have ignored it. I wanted to. But then a coworker, someone from my firm, pulled me aside and whispered, "Hey, I saw something online. Is everything okay?" That's when I realized Lydia wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was trying to ruin me. I sat in my apartment that night, scrolling through her posts, my hands trembling, not from sadness, but from anger. She had written about my failed relationships, my controlling behavior, even hinted that I had taken advantage of Mom and Dad's kindness. Every line was a lie, but it didn't matter. She had what she wanted, control of the narrative. And then came the second blow. While reviewing my online bank statements that weekend, old habit, I guess, I noticed something strange. A new business loan had appeared, co-signed under my name, $20,000, taken out for inventory expansion at my parents' store, except I hadn't signed anything. My stomach dropped. I dug deeper, checked the scanned documents through the bank's portal, and there it was, my name, my forged signature, Lydia's handwriting disguised in careful loops. A wave of disbelief washed over me so strong I had to sit down. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, a calculated attempt to bind me to their failure, to drag me down one last time. For hours, I sat in the dark, the city lights flickering through the blinds, replaying every moment of my life with them. All the nights I stayed up balancing their accounts, all the times I paid their overdue bills, all the times I forgave them for small cruelties. And this was how it ended. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just went numb. It was like standing in the wreckage of a fire you didn't start but kept trying to put out. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my grandfather. Henry Monroe, my father's father, lived alone in Florida, a retired contractor, rough around the edges, but fair. He was the kind of man who didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. When he picked up, his voice was warm but weary. "Evelyn, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything all right?" I opened my mouth, but for a moment, no sound came out. Then everything poured out. The anniversary dinner, the Facebook lies, the forged loan, all of it. There was a long silence on the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, but full of anger he tried to hide. "They did what?" "You listen to me, sweetheart. Get on a plane, come see me. We're going to fix this." I hesitated. "Grandpa, I don't want to drag you into—" "Evelyn," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You've carried them long enough. It's time someone carried you." That night, I booked a flight to Tampa. For the first time in years, I packed without hesitation. No guilt, no excuses, just purpose. When I arrived at his small house near the beach, he was waiting on the porch, the sunset painting the ocean behind him. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were still the same, steady, kind, full of truth. He hugged me tight, then said, "Tell me everything." Slowly, we sat in his living room for hours, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the spaces between my words. I showed him the screenshots, the loan papers, Lydia's posts. His jaw tightened, hands clenched on his knees. When I finished, he stood, pacing. "That's not family," he said finally. "That's betrayal." Twice over, he took out his phone, dialed his lawyer, and said something that changed everything. "It's time to update my will." I didn't ask him to. He didn't need convincing. He had seen enough. "They've used you your whole life," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "Now they'll know what it feels like to lose something they took for granted." That night, as the waves crashed softly against the shore outside his window, I realized something profound. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in rage or revenge. It arrives quietly, in the heart of someone who finally sees you for who you are. Grandpa Henry didn't waste time. The next morning, his lawyer came to the house, a quiet man in a dark suit who carried his briefcase like it contained the weight of every broken promise in our family. We sat at the small kitchen table as Grandpa explained, calm but firm, every word deliberate. "Remove Philip and Carol Monroe and their daughter Lydia from the will," he said. "Transfer full ownership of my Florida properties and investments to Evelyn. Allocate 10% to the local veterans charity." The lawyer looked surprised but didn't question it. When he left, the house fell into a soft stillness. Grandpa turned to me, his eyes softening. "You've earned this, Evie. Not because of the money, but because you never asked for anything back." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears catching in my throat, not from joy, but from relief. The kind that only comes when someone finally sees the truth you've been carrying alone for decades. The next weeks unfolded like a quiet storm. Word spread fast. My parents found out about the new will through one of Grandpa's old business friends. First came the phone calls, then the emails, angry, pleading, desperate. "Evelyn, how could you do this to us?" "Your grandfather is confused. We can fix this if you just talk to him." But I didn't reply. For once, silence was my armor. Then came the reckoning. The store, once barely surviving on my money and advice, finally collapsed. Without the $500 I'd sent each month, without my spreadsheets, without my warnings about taxes, it all fell apart. Suppliers pulled out. The IRS came knocking. The store closed its doors within months. When the truth surfaced, about the forged loan, about the years I'd kept them afloat, the family's sympathy shifted. Cousins who had once taken Lydia's side turned cold. An uncle even called my father at a barbecue and said, "You pushed her away." Now look at you. Lydia tried to delete her posts, but screenshots don't disappear. Her lies unraveled publicly, piece by piece, until all that remained was the silence of people who finally saw her for who she was. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in their suffering, only peace in knowing I no longer carried their weight. Grandpa sent me a handwritten letter a month later. "It's done. The papers are final. They won't get a cent. You can rest now. I kept that letter folded in my journal, not as proof of victory, but as a reminder that real justice doesn't shout, it doesn't humiliate. It simply removes what no longer deserves to stay." As for my parents, they moved into a small apartment outside the city. Lydia bounced between jobs. Their world had grown small, like their hearts had always been. Mine, on the other hand, had finally begun to open. It's strange how peace doesn't always come with celebration. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in small mornings when the world feels soft again. Months passed after Grandpa's decision. I didn't check on my parents, didn't answer Lydia's calls when she tried to apologize. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always about opening the door again. Sometimes it's about quietly locking it, walking away, and never looking back. My life grew simple, but full. I threw myself into my work, and for once, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I helped a local nonprofit organize their finances, something Grandpa's letter had inspired me to do. When they thanked me with teary eyes and warm hugs, it struck me how different genuine gratitude felt. It didn't drain me, it healed me. Outside of work, I found my small circle: Kathleen, my best friend, and Brian, the man who'd walked into my life when I least expected it. We'd sit on my balcony with coffee and soft music playing, and they'd listen, really listen, to the pieces of my story I'd never told anyone before. No judgment, no advice, just presence. One evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Brian said something that stayed with me. "You didn't lose a family, Evelyn. You just found out who they really were." And in that moment, I felt a quiet kind of freedom, the kind that doesn't shout or demand justice, the kind that simply is. I started taking long walks by the lake, feeling the air on my skin, realizing I didn't have to carry their ghosts anymore. My worth was never supposed to come from people who couldn't see it. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us, that sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. There's a line I keep close now, one Grandpa once said to me on his porch: "Peace doesn't mean forgetting what they did. It means refusing to let it define who you are. If you've ever been the one left out, overlooked, or made to feel invisible, I hope you hear this and know you're not broken. You were just loving the wrong audience." If this story touched something in you, take a moment, breathe, reflect, and maybe share it. Someone out there might need to know they're not alone either. The camera would fade out on Evelyn standing by the ocean in Florida, barefoot, hair caught in the wind, holding Grandpa's letter. No tears, no anger, just peace. And her final words, soft but certain: "Sometimes losing the people who hurt you is the most honest kind of freedom."